Thank you very much for having me today and coming out in this lovely weather we have in Chicago. I'm the rep for Chicago Faucets in the Chicagoland area. I'm with Inland Sales Group. We represent about 12 manufacturers of plumbing products made here in the USA. And I am also not just speaking from the manufacturer side. My dad's a plumber. My grandfather's a plumber. I've been doing it for many, many years. So I'm not just trying to always sell stuff. So I guess I'll get started on the history of Chicago. It all started pretty much with this Quatern cartridge. It's our original compression cartridge. The gaskets have changed throughout the years. You went from asbestos, cork, now we have rubber. It all kind of changed with modifications in the codes. And still today, though, you can take a 100-year-old Chicago faucet and throw this brand new cartridge in and it's still going to work. On top of the compression style, which is a great repairable item. In the back here, there you can get our 1277 DAB repair kit, change the washer, change a couple of the O-rings, and it can go back in there. That's the best thing about this cartridge. It's repairable. You don't need to replace it every time like a traditional cartridge is normally made today. But on top of that, sometimes the one downfall of this guy is in a lot of hospitals, or when you get into, people call this the ADA handle, and you'll notice it'll start to creep back a little more as people really try to close that because it's a drip and they want to really compress it. And so that washer is slowly getting compressed further and further, and it slowly just starts walking back. But that's why we put a 16-point broach on our handle. So all you have to do is find that closed position, and you can reset it to being closed, and then it goes back to normal function. But if people they don't want to keep having to check their handles, that's why we came out with our ceramics. So still you have that 5-year warranty on the ceramic cartridge with Chicago, and though you'll notice it's a little taller. This is our 377, this is our shorter styles. We also make them in the long stem. But this cartridge and this cartridge, if they were the same stem length, can go into the same body. They're interchangeable. With that 100-year-old faucet, our ceramic can work in that one as well. What this does is gives you the positive stop. So once it's closed, it's not moving until someone finally, if rust gets in there. That's the downfall of these. They can break when you hit the rust, where this will still seal until it really gives out. But you get that positive stop, so no creep. And our most brand new addition to our manual faucets is our introduction of the Xkc Cartridge. And so that guy is actually a ceramic cartridge, but what we've introduced is a check into the cartridge. So the biggest problem in commercial buildings, if you're looking at mop sink faucets or commercial kitchens where you have pre-rinse sprayers, such as this one, this valve isn't going, and water's always going to find the easiest way out. So if your pump on the cold side is stronger than your hot, you're going to have a cross flow per se. In this cartridge, the waterways are going to be slightly open. The hot's going to push in one way or the other. You're either going to have hot in your cold or cold in your hot. With having this check, water goes through, it comes in this way, it can't go out the other way. So it stops the cross flow and then mitigates a lot of the problems that we see today. Along with cartridges, when you're looking at a Chicago faucet, there's metering style. So you're going to either see our MVP cartridge, which is our quintessential, or the Naiad metering cartridge. And again, they all still drop into that same valve body that the manuals are in, so interchangeability. But when you are first going to look at one of our faucets, a couple things you're going to see. If you're in a residential, you're pretty much just looking at an angle stop or a straight stop, and the supply hose going into the body of the faucet in the bottom, and that's where the cartridge, or the hose will connect from the bottom. Typically you're going to be behind a sink, but when you're under there, ours are going to come with the nut. You would remove that, and this hose actually just threads on, and there's a gasket in the bottom there. And then you would either tighten it, if you can get back there, with crescent wrench, channel locks, whichever one. For this part, you're not looking at that. So channel locks are perfectly fine with the teeth. When you have a really tough situation, that's when you bring out the basin wrench. Basin wrench, it's going to allow you to get behind that sink, and it's going to catch onto the nut, and you're going to be able to spin it this way instead of having to get your hand. So you're going to be able to turn it from the bottom. So that's the one piece that you're typically going to want to make sure you have if you're going behind a sink, especially when they're a deep basin. When changing anything in our faucets, we recommend to use, or any faucet for that matter, if you're taking metal to chrome, be sure that it's either an adjustable crescent or your channel locks that are toothless. You don't want to mar the chrome, because after you do that, it kind of just doesn't look as nice. That being said, for anything, there's also strap wrenches for your flush valves that you see. Along with adjustability, that's the biggest thing with Chicago. So you've currently got a 10-inch gooseneck spout on here, but let's say you fell out of love with that, or you wanted to get, you were throwing this onto a 3-compartment sink and you don't have that reach that you need. So this standard body 786 can easily be changed, and it can be modified to a double jointed spout. So now it's going to be a lower profile, but your spout can move just, with the double jointed. We have high arc, vacuum breakers, kind of anything you need, or any kind of spout you can imagine, but it just threads on just like that other one. Handle styles, you're also going to see, a lot of people assume that you need this to be ADA. Because it's the wrist blade, it's the ADA. What makes a cartridge ADA is that, or what anything ADA, it's the actual cartridge. It's 5 pounds of pressure to open or close the valve. So you can have a lever handle such as this on there. That's an ADA handle. Even depending, and a lot of times it's also how it's installed. So the height, I believe it's between a set parameter of height. I apologize, roughly about 36 inches. But there's a given area where you need to install it to be able to be ADA. So it's how it's installed determines the ADA. But it's the cartridge, that 5 pounds of pressure, that really determine that. Going from there, when looking at faucets, also you can also look at lavatory faucets. So for instance, our new 410 faucet, you've got, typically you're always going to see that lovely red and blue dot that tells you hot or cold, of course, the indicator that always gets destroyed. Does anyone have any experience with trying to get these out? What do you normally use?
Actually, I had experience with an inexpensive kitchen faucet, not of course.
And they had a...
And the indicator was, I think, probably silicone, and I was being aggressively wiping the water off it to prevent mineral buildup, and I accidentally knocked out that little button. Now, the faucet in my bathroom has one of these indicators, but I don't know what it is, but it's solidly cemented in.
Okay. Well, so typically, and if you look, normally someone's using a pocket knife or some sort of sharp object to pop this out. For either of our 420 or our 410 series faucets, there's a lovely disc here that the escutcheon actually, when you pull up, I'm going to pop that out, and so I don't have to damage this, because this piece, this is just plastic. It just pops in. It's purely to cover, and what it's covering is the Allen key, the set screw to the cartridge. So after I've popped that out, I'm going to set that side away from the drain, or typically cover the drain if you're going to be working on it. Also, shut the supplies off. I hate to say it, but I've also gone to job sites where it was vice versa. Shut off or not turned on to the faucet. So once I loosen that enough, you don't need to take it all the way out. It's going to come off. You're going to see that it's just, this is purely superficial in terms of it's just there to cover our lovely brass nut that's holding in our... Now, because it's brass, you can, now every time you touch brass with channel locks and you're really squeezing, because we also work with a gas company, every time you touch and cut away that, you're damaging the brass. So I would typically, if you can use something toothless, use it, because you're not going to be damaging that the brass. So once you thread this off, this is what's causing that compression. Because if you look at the bottom of this cartridge, you can see O-rings. O-rings, of course, are pretty much what's stopping anything from leaking. But this is the piece, if you were leaking, or if you had drips, this is most likely broken. When ceramics break, they're broke. There's really no fixing them. But you would take this piece out, then just reinstall it. You can see in the bottom here, the waterway. So our faucet between other people, it's also, this is a solid brass waterway. We don't have copper tubes running in the inside where it's just a zinc die cast. This is cast brass. But when you drop it in place, there's also indicators. So I'm gonna make sure it falls in those holes. If you're setting high temperature limit stop, for anti-scald, there's high temperature limit stop. This is not a scald protection device. So if you're in a commercial setting, you're going to be required to have some sort of thermostatic mixing valve. I know they've got them in the back here. Chicago makes them. A lot of people make thermostatic mixing valves. But this will help you in your home. Your water heater's constantly set at 140. And this little gray ring, I'm going to just, you lift it up, and it enables it to go at how far hot do you want it to be able to go. Just like people do on their showers. Oftentimes I see, though, people will just take that off so they get a little full action on their shower, and they, because people like hot showers. But, so that's just going to pop onto place. And then you're going to reset your handle. Again, take that nut. It's just going to always first start by hand. If you get a stop, check the threads to make sure you're not going to cross thread, or if there's some junk, some rust maybe in the water line or in the waterways that got trapped, and you just tightened it down by going on a wrench real quick, damage the threads. You might just put the whole faucet out of commission. Then you're just going to place that back, handle. Once you tighten, then you can just pop your. What's fun is when you do this backwards and guess what's left and right. But then it just pops back in place. When installing the faucet, there's also many, many different styles of installation kits nowadays. We've gone to, on this faucet, we actually supplied the supply hoses. And we also installed screens. You're gonna, oftentimes on faucets, you're gonna see, look for screens. That's gonna protect that cartridge even further from that rust that I talked about that can unfortunately easily damage a ceramic cartridge, because if rust gets in there and you really pop it on there, if you have some showers, they crack very easily. But when going after these are actually installed in their bathrooms in the back. This one actually has two posts that are into the body. And once all you have to really do is loosen them, because it's metal on metal. What's fun is getting up to them when they're below a faucet. You could also, in this situation, use a hollow screwdriver, like a hollow nut driver, where it would go into the posts, and then you could just attach to the nuts. But when you're, so even once you get that loosened, because all you need to do is really kind of crack it from that solid position, and as long as there's nothing blocking the way, you're going to remove that nut. And you'll see a lot of times, depending on the faucet, they'll either come with a gasket to go on the bottom of the faucet, or you would use, so for this install, what we've done, instead of you having to use putty, which oftentimes you would bring to a installation just to put around the base just so no leaks happen, and give a solid base, we have an O-ring so you're not touching metal to your countertop to mitigate any potential damage that could happen. But so you just have your posts, your supply lines. They're held in by a screw, so they're not moving out of place. these same supply lines are used in our faucets, such as our, these are our electronics. When you're in a commercial building, you often see electronic faucets. You know, your manual kitchen faucet, your $1,000 electronic faucets, same supply lines to, you know, we've tested them. They're not just going to fall out on you. But that screw's there purely to hold them in. Dropping into place, just to kind of show you that, again, that O-ring seals it. And then all I'm going to do, sorry, is come up first with the gasket at the bottom so that my metal, you also have this piece that's, and then you're just going to reinstall by threading up. It's nice when they're nice and new, but even the ones in the bathrooms, I installed this way, and as soon as I got them hand tight, then I would just finish them, because you never want to over tighten any of the nuts, because you don't want to crack the countertop. You don't want to, risk breaking any of the different pieces of the install. A lot of times it's the like bolts on a toilet. Over tighten them, you might crack that china. Same story, however, for our 420, you still have that ability to raise that up. But other than that, instead of the supply lines, you have half-inch shanks that go through. So you always want to make sure you know what supply line you need. Do you need 3/8 to 3/8? You need 3/8 to half. Oftentimes your angle stops are going to be 3/8 compression, and you're going to want to make sure you have that half-inch connection to go to, of course, the shank at the bottom. And then when it comes to in commercial buildings, more and more you'll see today are electronics. So electronic faucets, on those installs, we're going to keep trying to make them easier and easier. We supply the supply lines from the box and from the faucet to the box. This is normally in a commercial building, so anything besides your house, you're going to have a solenoid. The solenoid is the same as my handle, my cartridge, in essence. So in an electronic faucet, solenoid is what opens the waterway and closes the waterway. You want to protect this as much as you can, because if, again, rust, sediment, anything gets in there, it can mess with it. You have a battery or a power source, so you no longer have your hand for the power source. It's either a battery, we have turbine, you have long-term power sources. You can also plug them into a wall. Just depends on what the building has. I mentioned 1070 mixing valves earlier. There's a state code change going on right now in Illinois, where they are wanting to turn the heater in a commercial building. Hot water has to be at 160 degree water. 160 degree water can burn you in 0.5 seconds is a third degree burn. So not 5 seconds, not 10 seconds, it's half of a second you have a third degree burn, instantaneous first degree. So that's in transition right now. They don't know if it's going to go in. It's in litigation point. But what protects you from that is not that high temperature limit stop that I showed you before on the traditional 410, because that's just saying, oh, hey, at 130, because I felt it at 130, oh, but now they jacked the temperatures in the tank up. So that is not a smart, it's just purely you set it. It's no reaction. But with a thermostatic mixing valve such as this one, or the brass one I showed you earlier, what this is, traditional point-of-use mixing valves have it's a paraffin wax cartridge. It expands and contracts based on water flow, and is tested to a standard. I keep mentioning Xkc 1070. That's the point-of-use mixer. So if you are in a commercial building, every faucet should have a point-of-use mixer, especially nowadays with potential code changes. Of course, it's not going to make retroactive unless you make fixture changes with an inspector coming in. But you want to make sure people are scald protected, because if that temperature goes up, a traditional faucet won't be able to protect you. But with that, so you've got your installation of that electronic faucet. You also, normally you have a sensor you're going to see in many, many, many electronic faucets. For our electronic faucet, we put the sensor in the spout. What this allows for is it's not going to deactivate it on you when you put your hand into the sink bowl because it loses vision of you, but it actually shoots down and shoots out, so it activates faster than our lovely, and these are more built for hospitals. But the same solenoid that is in this box, built for office buildings, is in this one. So we put the same quality, but we took it into a below deck situation. But I mentioned earlier about the 1070 wanting to protect scald protection. What we've done is we now have our 410 and our 420 series and added scald protection in the cartridge. So you remember this one was white and blue. That's a very common traditional ceramic cartridge. This cartridge itself, if you notice, there's a piece of copper down here, and then there's two little checks that look similar if you were to look in that mixing valve. This stops that cross flow. That little metal copper piece is actually the paraffin wax thermostatic mixing valve in the cartridge. So now you've got a faucet with the 1070 mixing valve in the cartridge. So it's going to expand when too hot, and so it's thinking for you. And so this is the brain of the faucet, making sure that you can't set the temperature. You can go hot, you can go colder, but at a point it's not going to allow anything hotter than 100. Our faucet, we set it won't allow more than 107 degrees coming out. So you're not going to get burned. So, and that's at full hot. So yeah, many different cartridge styles and things to think about in the commercial world. For my little guy, this is a faucet that when we bought the house I installed because we had two handle mixers that, we have a 2.5-year-old, he turns on hot all the way. I'd rather him not, be screaming.